Wow, you've reached a truly vital stage in the overall Leadership Basics series. Today, our attention is squarely focused on how to motivate your team members. There's so much great information in this video that we were debating splitting it in two, but we're already committed to having one video for each of the 10 topics, so we found a way to package it. Are you ready? Sit back, stay tuned in, and remember the show notes below for links to additional material. Here we go. What we will cover in the next 10 to 15 minutes is shown here on the screen. It broadly deals with 7 key considerations when understanding and addressing the topic of motivation. We can split these 7 into 3 clusters. The first cluster of 3 considerations we call our motivational enablers. This cluster are like the prerequisites to motivating and cover leadership behaviours, workplace environment, and a healthy brain. The second cluster, a group of 2 considerations we call our Motivational Platform, where we'll look closer at the workplace generational mix and the various motivational theories available to us. The final and third cluster we call Motivational Techniques, where we dig into using rationale and emotion when triggering action. Under emotion, we explore both extrinsic and intrinsic motivators to satisfy the inner needs, and the last area is to look at the latest neuroscience model called SCARF to assist us in determining the right intrinsic motivators to use. Before we go further, however, I want to pause here and add that to be successful in motivating your team requires effort and focus on your part. Seldom have we witnessed a motivated team where the leader hasn't been fully engaged and leading the way. Hence, all of the following 7 considerations require you to be in the centre of the action. With that said, let's move into our first cluster, the motivational enablers. These are a prerequisite before attempting to motivate, and if properly addressed, will improve your chances of success dramatically. Number 1 in this first cluster is you as the leader and the leadership behaviour which you display and operate from. Your team want a leader that embodies all 5 of these. Simply stated, the behaviours are TLSAE: trust, listen, share, accept, and enable. For trust, the team needs to trust that you have their back and will stand by your word. In turn, you need to demonstrate that you trust the team and that they're working with, not against you. With listen, remember 2 ears and 1 mouth. Practice active listening and engage dialogue. Give your team a chance to have their say. For share, communicate openly, transparently, and frequently. Remove the potential for hidden agendas and rumours with regular town halls, Q&A, and feedback sessions. Accept that the team are competent and capable. Seek opportunities to engage them in discussion-making processes and learn how to delegate meaningfully. And finally, enable. Building on the first 4 traits, ensure that you provide a way for your team members to develop and grow. Provide sufficiently challenging tasks which encourages their input and shared learnings. One last consideration here. As leaders today, we must accommodate diversity and virtual teams. This brings with it different cultures, locations, and communication challenges which may hinder our ability to successfully demonstrate all 5 of these traits. Leaders today, therefore, need not only to be effective in face-to-face situations and with their own local teams, but they must be clear on how to build a team with trust and relationships in all circumstances and effectively connect in our global operations. The second motivational enabler looks at the workplace environment. Not always something which is fully within our immediate control, given budget constraints and fixed facilities. As was just mentioned, we must also give due consideration to the reality of today's virtual teams. They can be as simple as employees working from home, to the more challenging in dealing with team members where workspaces are scattered regionally or even globally. But if you're creative and engage your team to participate in the discussion and decision process, you can and should come up with ways to improve the working environment and meet the current day open, modern and healthy workspace expectations. It's something which nearly all employees want and appreciate. Whether this is a fixed office or mobile space, remote or local, taking steps to transform your team's working surroundings, the ambience and creation of an overall healthier atmosphere has the potential to generate a mindset change and impact on working attitudes. The third and final motivational enabler and prerequisite to motivating is a little more challenging to ensure than the first two, as it looks at enabling a healthy mind through 7 key foundational life and work practices. A detailed review of these 7 can be found in an article titled The Healthy Mind Platter, published by the Neuro Leadership Journal, issue number 4, way back in 2012. We've placed a link to the article on our site and in the show notes. To avoid becoming too technical, we've simplified the findings somewhat, and you should notice that it supports many previously held beliefs in this regard. The 7 daily practices to creating a healthy mind are: adequate sleep. This can include as little as 10 to 15 minutes of a daily power nap. Number 2, regular physical exercise. Number 3, the ability to engage in playful activities. Number 4, sufficient rest time, which is somewhat different from sleep. Number 5, opportunities for socializing, whether that's with colleagues, friends or family. Number 6, importantly, work-related focus time. And number 7, the last one rounding out the numbers, is the practice of mindfulness. The newest perhaps in this group, and it's the subject of considerable research. We see the practice becoming quite common and popular nowadays. So there you have it. Start with your own mind, challenge yourself to see which of these you're fulfilling, and then look to your team. Question the current working and lifestyle of your team. What might be changed to enhance or enable their 7 practices? Remember, any of the 3 motivational enablers may work as a form of motivation, but more so, they serve as the opening up for the team to other performance possibilities. So we've addressed the motivational enablers, and we're ready to tackle the next 2 topics under Cluster 2, which we call our Motivational Platform. And the first is a major one. Our workforce today spans 4 different generations, from baby boomers through Generation X, Millennials, and Gen Z, or iGen as they're quite often referred to. There's nothing new with the age spread. Young employees have traditionally entered the scene around 18 to 20 years of age and work beside veterans 60 years or more, thus offering a breadth of working knowledge and expertise spanning 40 to 50 years. i.e., if someone entered the workforce in 1970 to 75, they'd be approaching retirement in the year 2020. The newest of these groups is Generation Z and will form by the year 2020 the second largest of the 4 groups mentioned. They'll make up around about 20% of the workforce. The difference comes when we explore the era that these generations were grown up in and therefore the expectations that accompany them. In some instances, these expectations have compounded from generation to generation, whilst particularly in the Millennials and the Gen Z case, they've been born into a different era from the prior 2, be it with wealthy parents, or looking at terrorism, financial crisis, or digitalisation. In the latter case, digitalisation, which has been continually reinventing itself at increasing speed. We're now entering one of the most transformational periods in our history, and certainly for this current workforce demographic. We're seeing a convergence of multiple technologies, each one singularly changing how we live, but collectively the impact on us is probably beyond most of our imaginations. And this is in the space of just a few years. Your role as leader is to come to terms with these varying needs and expectations as you look to employ the right motivated techniques. We provide links to several articles which discuss the Gen Y and Gen Z groups so you have a deeper understanding. Okay, so we're almost ready to start motivating. But what should we focus on and how to do it? These two questions need to be considered first and therefore form part of the last topic of our second cluster. For more than a century, researchers have been asking these questions, and the results are quite interesting. We list here a number of the better-known motivational theories which have evolved from these studies. Theories from legends such as Freud, Maslow, Herzberg, Adams, through to the more modern and less-known neuroscience studies and people such as David Rock. Not surprisingly, perhaps, that over time, as our workforce changed, so too has the research findings. Of course, technology has played a significant role, enabling us to perform studies in different ways, particularly in recent decades with the development in the area of neuroscience. With each new theory comes a new level of sophistication in our understanding. And each theory, as it gets accepted by the experts and adopted, we can glean a common thread from past findings and also identify elements which bring something new to the table. For the purposes of moving forward and on to the final cluster, we'll work mostly with the modern day theories, those originating around about 1970 onwards through the last decade. And so now to cluster 3, and the last two of our topics where we work with rational and emotional strategies and how to motivate by addressing inner needs through extrinsic and intrinsic means. We've learnt that leaders need to be able to address the rational, i.e. provide a logical, well-structured and simplistic communication when introducing any change topic to the team. To do this, the leader must provide the meaning related to the topic before being introduced and enabling the team to see the big picture as well as where they fit into the process. This helps when receiving the information to digest and associate it on a personal level, and it offers the chance for clarity on the reasoning behind the action. By itself, however, it's unlikely to be sufficient. That's because we often need a little emotional stimulus to kickstart us into action. Here we identify two methods to generate this emotional tie. Firstly, we have the traditional power play at our disposal. However, this is no longer the accepted approach for most cultures. It may be necessary in certain circumstances, but as a general rule, we try and avoid this method. The preferred way to trigger buy-in and action is via motivation. And this is what we'll discuss for the remainder of this video. Starting with the understanding of two words, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic meaning things such as incentives, pay increases or bonuses. Typically, these provide only a short to medium term stimulus for an individual. We often refer to this as the carrot used to derive an outcome, and whilst this is often important and necessary, it's not always possible, nor is it seen as a lasting solution. The most preferred approach is to address those inner needs using intrinsic motivators, and depending on the individual, they may prefer any variety of the options available. Things such as recognition, empowerment, autonomy, challenging tasks, etc. Each of these fall into the intrinsic category. Therefore, we now know that we need to be able to lead change through the use of both rational and emotional stimuli. For the emotional component, we do this through motivating, perhaps using a combination of both extrinsic and intrinsic motivators. And now for the final piece of the puzzle, an understanding of how to determine the best motivators for each individual in your team. To assist us in this task, we turn to neuroscience and the latest study published in 2008 on the use of motivation through determining what triggers social behaviour in people. There are two aspects. The first being the principle of threat and reward. The second being 5 domains of social experience, which, depending on how each is triggered, can activate a negative threat response or a positive reward response with our brain neuron circuitry. The actual model uses an acronym called SCARF, and each letter relates to one of the 5 domains: status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. In our notes on our website, we'll connect you to a link where you can complete an online assessment to determine your own domain mixture and which of the 5 are most dominant. Understanding yourself first helps you understand the tool and the theory itself better. You should then have your team perform the same assessment so that you have a clear picture about what domains you need to focus on when trying to motivate an individual through reward, and which areas you need to be careful of not to trigger as a threat. The good news is that this model works across generations, naturally with differing domains, but still with the 5 domains in play. And that's it. We've covered a lot of territory in this video, examining 3 clusters of 7 different considerations to achieve highly motivated current and future teams. The more of cluster 1 and 2 which you can incorporate into your preparation and planning, then the higher the chance that you will have great success motivating your team. Provided, of course, that you then incorporate the how-to actions, combining rational and emotive strategies through a mixture of extrinsic and intrinsic motivators based on what you've learned through the SCARF model for each individual and their social behaviour preferences. We're planning an advanced series of videos to follow this basic series, and one topic in that will be peak performance, which is a fairly logical next step following on from a motivated team. Okay, so that's the first 2 basics completed. Basic 1 was about understanding your place in the team, and this one about motivating your current and future team. Next up, we look at how to take our motivated employees and find creative ways for you, the leader, to engage and delegate tasks or projects. Looking forward to you joining us for that as we explore what our 4 generations require and answer 3 questions related to delegation: why, what, and how. And if you haven't already, don't forget to subscribe below. Bye for now.